Hey class, this is Michelle. I'll go ahead and post the discussion questions. I'll read them first and then give you my answers as I research them in the classroom assigned book, as well as any other research I may have done online. So the first question reads, when does police use of force becomes excessive or unjustified? According to the book, excessive and unjustified police force includes unnecessary brutal physical coercion when the offender is not causing the officer to protect himself or herself from physical attack, or when the arrest is not being resisted, and when the police purpose is not being defied, such as a house search with warrant, where the house residents have been notified sufficiently and correctly, unlike a no-knock warrant. I found that on page 161 of The Color of Justice, Race, Ethnicity, and Crime in America, our assigned course book. Reforms for excessive police force have shown force incidents dropped, such as the book gives an example regarding the Oakland Police Department, who had 1,200 incidents in 2014 reported, and they went down to 606 in the same year, a decrease of 50% just by the implementation of excessive or unjustified police brutality as well. On the same token, complaints against officers dropped from 2,593 in 2012, and 2 years later, they were down to, in 2014, to 1,067. Officer involved shootings fell from 15 in the years between 2011 to 2012 to only 2 in the years of 2014 and 2015. And that information is found on page 165. A more current example of excessive force can be seen in the US Supreme Court's case Torres versus Madrid, where law enforcement in Albuquerque, New Mexico attempted to force stop Roxanne Torres, who dropped off a friend and came under suspicion of police presence in the area during the event. Due to their dark clothing and tactical gear, as it was nighttime, she mistook their approach to her as a possible carjacking situation and began to drive away. The officers proceeded to shoot into the vehicle, thinking that she was aiming to run over them. And although she was shot several times, she drove off and evaded them and lived. The situation was an attempt by law enforcement to detain a suspect, but failed to do so. The court ruled that the purpose of restraining Ms. Torres was defined as a seizure and lawful by the officer's actions. Ms. Torres pursued the ruling by filing a civil action suit against the officers in the United States District Court for the District of New Mexico. Under the defense reasoning, the use of gunfire was excessive force, according to the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. However, the district court ruled that since the shooting did not make her stop, it was not a seizure, and ruled once more against her. Ms. Torres persevered in her pursuit of justice, and in the end, on March 25th, 2021, by a ruling of 5-3, the 10th Circuit's ruling was reversed and concluded in her favor that the seizure was accomplished when Ms. Torres was shot by the gunfire action from the police officers and deemed unneeded physical force. And this can be found in an article called Constitutional Law, Fourth Amendment, Search and Seizure, Police Misconduct, Torres versus Madrid, Harvard Law Review, from a published peer review article in 2021. The second question goes on to ask, or to state, the book argues that some progress has been made in reducing racial profiling. What evidence supports the view? Evidence that I found on page 161 does support the view, and that I already stated the Oakland police department was shown to have reduced incidences of excessive abuse, and it went down from in 1 year by 50%. I am persuaded because of the aforementioned Oakland Police Department, the statistics of complaint dropping down from 2014 to 2012 to 2014. And then, excuse me, guys. Presently is an example shown by the creation of the Connecticut Racial Profiling Prohibition Project from recent newly revised version of the PEN Act. Accordingly, the project staffers investigated 3.5 million traffic stops starting in 2013 in relation to Connecticut and Rhode Island state traffic laws to determine which communities suffer the highest incidence of racially profiled traffic stops. The results had been since have been used since to reduce racial profiling in several communities and have helped improve police effectiveness. The main focus has now been placed on roadway safety and not in using traffic stops and addressing other issues like profiling. And law enforcement has been bettered because of it. In the future, there are plans to improvise the reduction of administrative or minor equipment violations by the creation of a two-tier system of traffic stops. This was reported by the Mirror newspaper as of January 30th, 2022. The third question says, substantial progress has been made with regard to the employment of people of color in policing. Does that make a difference in actual police operations on the street, and in what ways? I found a good explanation on page 185 of the classroom book, because it stated that at the time that it was published, little research on the subject had been done, with the exception of one longitudinal 15-year study, which found affirmative changes in the attitudes of police officers of the LAPD when more officers of colors and more women were hired. Opinion-based study, the opinion-based study resulted in that the overall attitudes of all officers who participated in the survey questionnaire became more favorable as the study aged. The most, until the recent one, which was like 2007. The most significant, 2007, yeah. The most significant data was noted to be that of the overview of the white officers having risen at a higher rate than their fellow African-American and Hispanic officers, which did eventually rise. In other words, that they were really in favor of hiring other people more than just whites, like African-American and Hispanic and women. The authors of the study stated that the unexpected findings suggested that the introduction of more African-American and Hispanic officers into the department served to, this is quote, unfreeze and change many of the pre-existing less community-oriented attitudes held by white officers. In short, diversifying the workforce can help to change internal culture of a police department. More currently, in a study titled Inequities in Employment by Race, Ethnicity, and Sector During COVID-19, authors Jordan Gemelas, Jenna Davidson, Casey Keltner, and Samantha Ng, they're all associated with the Oregon Health and Science University study, excuse me, School of Medicine in Portland, Oregon, and the Oregon Health and Science University, the part of the School of Public Health, also in Portland, Oregon, and the Highland Hospital Department of Internal Medicine in Oakland, California. That is where they're all tied into and where they came together for this study. They reported that prior to the study, structural racism and employment facts had been determined substantially, and that differential access to equal pay, paid sick leave, and unemployment benefits disproportionately harm people of color. History showed that hiring and employment discrimination was not a new event to Black, Hispanic, Latinx, and Asian American people as they all have experienced rampant discrimination in the context of hiring and employment. With social determinants of health, including health insurance, income, housing, and several other resilient factors, the ability of workers to access these benefits varied widely across occupations. Successful employment is associated with improved physical and mental health, and employment frequently precedes health insurance coverage. In other words, the lower income class may have made stronger hiring and employment discrimination. The study also points out that the low income groups were susceptible to sickness, and it's a particularly relevant fact since the pandemic worsened physical and mental health overall. The majority of the employed in frontline positions face a higher risk for contracting COVID because the majority of frontline workers are people of color who can't perform their jobs remotely, which limits protection against COVID. The study cites that in 2019, data gathered show Black workers were more likely to be employed in essential industry and occupations with frequent exposures to infections, including healthcare delivery, food preparation, animal slaughtering and processing in the processing industry, which is a key source of isolated outbreaks during the pandemic, or public transportation. They're also mostly hired in the healthcare and social assistant industries. In the end, the results for frontline versus non-frontline workers showed that both groups, frontline and non-frontline, of Black, Hispanic, Latinx, and Asian American people demonstrated dramatic decreases in number employed, with each group demonstrating statistically significant differences in magnitude of loss. The study revealed that previously employed low-income workers had a greater likelihood of job loss during recent economic decline attributable to COVID-19 as a correlation of Black, Hispanic, Latinx, and Asian American people of low income, low education, and inadequate medical insurance coverage within context being more with a higher vulnerability of contracting COVID-19. The study accurately reported that Black, Hispanic, Latinx, and Asian American people did lose employment and or left lower risk and potentially more secure non-frontline positions relative to white workers in the first half of 2020. Confirmation from the results shows structural racism of Black or African American workers being employed at a higher proportion in at-risk occupations, and the use of racism against Asian Americans and Hispanic or Latinx people as a political tool in combination with increased public knowledge and reported police use of excessive force and politicians utilizing discriminatory narratives, not assisting in the overdue increased awareness of racism as a public health emergency in the mainstream American society. Yeah, all that. And I welcome your comments. I'll be looking at your posts and commenting my own. Thank you and have a good day.